Hello everyone and good evening to all and happy Diwali to all the participants for GMC. We since we could not complete our discussion yesterday, so we'll be taking the remaining financial statements today. Try to analyze how each of these variables in the balance sheet and the cash flow statement is getting calculated. So we'll wait for another 5-10 minutes for all the participants to join. So if before we start, I would like to know if any participant would like to would want me to cover a particular variable again that we discussed in the last session, or would like to bring in forward any doubt so that I can keep that in mind when I take this session forward. So any participant that would like to has a query with relation to the previous discussion that we have had, or any other matter for instance. So we'll still wait for 5-10 minutes for everybody to join. So if any participant has a doubt regarding the last session, they can bring it forward and I'll be happy to clarify it.
Sir, could you repeat the demand generation part that you spoke about in the last?
The
economic outlook.
Okay. So Adil, we'll spend some time, after this in the end of the session to discuss more on the economics.
Okay,
so I
fine.
think it will be better. So I've kept a note of this. We'll discuss more on economics at the end of the session. So apart from that, any other participant?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, Shekhar, please.
Yeah, I wanted to understand what exactly do we take a look when we do the demand forecasting? Like there is an order scheduled and what are the solds? So what all parameters should we look in the history and upcoming so as to better mark that? I had a bit of confusion there.
Okay. So that's more of a theoretical, it requires more of a theoretical answer rather than a mathematical answer to this. Let's consider the real scenario. Even in the real life, when you will be working for a company, you don't have a magic wand or anything that will tell you the exact numbers that will be sold in the next quarter. But what you have is the historical data or the current economics of the market. Now let's observe. Let's see in the historical data the sales from let's say you're playing for the quarter 3 now. So already the quarter 2 has happened. So now you go you look at the historical data. How did the quarter 3 behaved in comparison to quarter 2? Did the sales go up? Did the sales go down? Also, you have to consider that because it is a 1 year back period now that we're discussing. What was the factors like the marketing budget, or what was the factors like the agents and distributors? So you get a perception whether the sales is going up or sales is going down. Probably what you have to assume is, let's say sales are going up, but at the same time the agents are also increased. So that pretty much nullifies the effect of the change in the quarter or the seasonality effect, because probably the increase in demand was down to the increase of the agents. So that is one variable, or that is one analysis that you can do for the prediction of demand. The second one, which is primarily the most important, is you have to see your production capacity. So you have to see your financial statements, you have to see your operation side, you have to see your production capacity, and what is the maximum that you can produce. Now let's say you predict, you see the demand, and you see that your production capacity is less than what the demand will be for the market, or this is something you forecast. So clearly you don't have to predict demand, but you just simply have to ensure that your resources are used to the maximum. So your demand forecast will pretty much highly depend on your production capacity. And also, let's say, and Shekhar, I'll put this question to you because you asked this doubt. Let's say you have your production capacity to produce more, and which is more than the demand you expect from the market. Do you think this could be a possibility for your company, that you decide to produce more and probably reduce your pricing, because trying to be a player in the supply demand game, wherein if you're trying to conquer the market by increasing your supply and reducing your pricing. Because I mentioned in my, in the decision before round 2 as well, that the cost of not producing, and even in the last session I discussed that for the previous team, and I'll again go back to that slide, where I showed you that how this particular company had underused its production capacity, and they ended up paying, even for the minimum wages. So this is something that you have to see. You cannot accurately predict the demand, but what you have to ensure is that if you have good warehouse stock, and we'll discuss the importance of warehouse stock as well in this session, your production capacity is not getting wasted. That is very important, that you have to ensure the demand. You can, if you're producing more, you can reduce your prices, you can increase your marketing budget, you can increase the number of agents. So you have to play with these variables. And the third factor that will help you in determining your demand is the change in the economics, which we'll of course discuss by the end of the session. So these are the variables, or these are the highlights that you can, you could also be facing a scenario when your company is making losses. So when a company is making losses, and if you still try to meet that demand, again, you are increasing your losses, because if you don't have the financial resources to produce, or if you're making losses, so definitely even in the real life, companies will cut down their production. And if you're cutting down your production, so you can then play with your pricing so that to bring your company back to the profit. So Shekhar, are you following what I'm trying to explain?
Yes, I'm following that. I just wanted, I understand the theoretical on how we demand forecast. That was not the question. My question was like, there are a couple of variables, right? Ordered to or sold to or produced. So I just wanted to understand, like for the forecasting my production, I should take into consideration the order that is coming up or how it has been increasing along with the stocks or warehouse stocks or the backlog that I have. So correct. Numerical is what I wanted to get a clarification on.
So, if you see this table, if you see this data particular, they had a backlog orders of 194 for product 1 in Europe. So how is this factor 194 is coming? If I deduct 117 with 1007, I get this as 164.
Correct.
Right? Probably, because they had certain, and now this probably, I think they had some warehouse stock. Okay. So, but this is backlog of orders is 194. I think normally the way is the difference, and what you get the difference, and then this, you divide this by 2. If you divide this by 2, then you get 82. That will be what is mentioned in the backlog of orders.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can, if you'll see the backlog of orders means, you had more orders. I think the sold to is higher because I think they had some warehouse, maybe they had some warehouse stock in the last quarter, or maybe they have taken up some product for improvement. Yeah, okay, they've taken up product 3 for improvement. So I have to analyze their historical reports on why there is this difference. But just to answer your query, when the next quarter starts, initially this backlog of orders will get clear, and only then you'll start getting new orders.
Okay, understood.
Yeah. All right. So any other participant that would like to share a doubt with regard to the previous session, any particular variable, or based on the administrative expenses and the income statement that we covered in the last session? All right. So guys, yesterday we discussed, how this income statement is getting developed, and we also discussed, what is the difference between the income statement and the cash flow statement. And we'll start our discussion, I'll take both these statements in together because they are primarily related to one another. So we'll start our discussion with both these statements. So the first part that we have to discuss is the non-current assets. So guys, I hope that you understand what we mean by non-current assets. I think this is something that you should all be knowing by now. So the first variable in the non-current assets is the lend. land. So how much, so we are getting this 50,000 euros as the value for the land. How are we getting this? So if you'll see your resources and products, you have a land owned of 1000 square meter, which your company has purchased. So at what cost they purchase? They purchase it at 50 euros per square meter. So accordingly, you have your land cost as 50,000, which will remain constant for this, which have remained constant for this company. How are you getting your buildings cost? So if you go your resources, if you see your resources and products, your factory size is 560 square meter. And then what is the cost of building? It is 500 rupees per square meter. So we simply multiply them and we get this figure as the 280,000 euros. Now coming to the machinery part, how we are getting this machinery? So it is simply, the machinery in the quarter 1 for year 17 was 1238840. So if I depreciate it by 2.5%, so I multiply this figure by 97.5%, I get this figure, which becomes the machinery, the value of machinery for this current quarter. So I sum them up, I get my non-current assets. Now moving forward to the operating activities and trading receipts and insurance and trading payments. Now again, I'll go back to the financial statements now. And this is something I discussed, guys. Let's say, and we discussed this yesterday, let's say you're buying inventory of 1000 rupees in quarter 1, let's say, for a period that will be delivered in a quarter 3. Let's assume this, guys. So my inventory of this 1000 euros will come in quarter 3. In my income statement, the expense that will be booked will be 1000 euros. But in my cash flow statement, because it is mentioned in the manual that you pay for your inventory, you pay 50% in this quarter and the remaining 50% in the next quarter. So in my cash flow statement, my expense would only come as 500 euros. So this 500 euros will form part of the trading payments. Sorry. And the remaining 500 euros will be paid in the next quarter. So this is something we discussed in the last session. Now let's look at this table, guys. Table 23 specifies that the target customer credit periods. So whatever you sell on internet, you get the payment from the customer straight away. It is like you're buying a product on Amazon, so you have to straight away make your payment. Only then your products get delivered. Whatever you sell to your agents, you get the agent has a time of 60 days to make the payment for the product that you are selling. Or that means that the payment, let's say if you're selling a good on day 1, the payment will come on day 61. And similarly for NAFTA, the credit time period is 90 days. So this is something mentioned in the manual. So I asked this participants this doubt is, and it's not a doubt, this is something we discussed. My sales revenue was 1896784, but my trading receipts is 1883389. And now when I see my trade receivables, it is 1031758. So if I sum my trading receipts with my trade receivables, it is coming as 2915147, but my revenue is 1896784. So why is this different, guys? Why is there a difference between my receipts and my revenue?
Receivables from previous period.
Correct. So this is what I've tried to show you. So in the quarter 1, the trade receivables in the balance sheet that were left was 1018363. So accordingly, the sales revenue in quarter 2 was 1896784. Receivable from quarter 1 that was pending because of this credit period, guys. Because of the 60 days and 90 days credit period, this was the amount that you will receive from last quarter in this quarter. And again, guys, the revenue of this was already added in the previous income statement, but not in the cash flow statement. In the cash flow statement, the value will be added only when you receive that particular money. So if and as per the cash flow statement, my trading receipts is 1883389. So that means my trade receivable in quarter 2 becomes, so I simply from this from 10189, from this 189, I deduct this trade receivables. 189, I deduct this and I add this amount. I get this as the difference of 1031, which is the formula I've done here. And if you'll see your balance sheet, this is the same value that is mentioned there in the trade receivables. And the same is the case with the trading payments, guys. Same is the case. And this is the table that we discussed yesterday, that for every service that you're taking from a third party or from the vendor, there is a time period within which you have to pay. It is not like this, and it does not happen even in the real world as well, that from let's say you have taken a decision for marketing of, let's say, 100,000 euros. So in the day one, you have to pay the 100,000 euros. That is not the case, guys. So is this trading receipts clear? Is this fundamental clear? Then how we are getting the trading receipts in the cash flow statement, and how we are getting trade receivables in the balance sheet? Is this variable clear, guys?
Yep.
All right. Okay. So now, so you get your trading receipts, you get your trading payments, and now see the difference, guys. The net cash flow from operations is negative. So again, this is again a mistake on the part of, so basically what you have to pay, or what you have paid in the last quarter, is higher than what you have received. Why is that so? Because this is what we discussed in the last quarter, that their income statement or their administrative expenses, the variables, were outrageous. They had not done the planning for it, and that is why their operative activities cash flow is coming negative, which is again reducing the money from your company's pocket. Now let's see the other variable. Now let's see the next variables. Let's see the current assets now. So you have product inventories. Why is it zero? Because the company had zero warehouse stock, guys. Okay. Now this is important to understand, and you can see here that they had zero warehouse stock, guys. Now let's consider this day one of a new quarter, guys. Now the orders start coming straight away from the start of the quarter. If you are having zero warehouse stock, guys, let's say you have 100 orders on day one, what will be the sold to quantity? It will be zero for this particular day, guys, because you have zero warehouse stock. So ideally, this warehouse stock will help you meet out your early orders or orders in the start of the quarters, because it will take time for your company to produce goods. Also, we discussed the load capacity. So your load, your products will be only shipped when one load is ready, or when one container is ready. So you can calculate the number of days or the number of hours you need to fulfill the capacity of one load. Only then it will be shipped. So if you are not having any warehouse stock, guys, you are losing probably you are losing the sales for initial 5 days, 10 days, which is again a loss of revenue. So are you able to follow the importance of warehouse stock, guys? And it is mentioned in the manual that the warehouse stock is very important. Yeah, warehouse stock is very important, to meet out your early orders at the start of the next quarter. So is this concept on the warehouse stock clear, guys? So Shekhar, you had a doubt with regard to demand planning, right? So you have to, when you are planning for your demand, you have to ensure that there, ideally no company in real life would like to have a zero warehouse stock. And you can take out the balance sheets from Money Control or other such websites, and you'll see, you'll see these product inventories value. It will not be zero. For you take out for any company, it will never be zero, because they always keep a certain warehouse stock for any, for the next, because the production cycle takes time. So that's why a zero product inventory is not good for your share price. That means that your company is not ready, or it is not ready to sell straight away in the next quarter.
Sir, I have one query here.
Yeah.
Sir, let's say there are some warehouse stocks available, and then if we take any product improvement, right? So then these stocks are supposed to be sold out at a cheaper price than what we try to sell, right?
Okay. So I am not asking you to have a warehouse stock, or I'm not suggesting you to have a warehouse stock of 1,000 products.
Mm.
What I mentioned is, so you can do this calculation yourself, that you have to, that a minimum a load will contain is 500 goods. So how much time your machine, and including the machine and the assembly time, how much weeks or how many days they will take to produce the minimum one load. So for that period only you need a warehouse stock. So if let's say now you're going for a product improvement, so virtually you will be only selling the warehouse, if you are having excess warehouse stock, of course you cannot take up that product for improvement. But having a zero warehouse stock is, you are losing your revenue in that case. Besides, for a particular product in a one span of round, you will be more or less, you will be able to take an improvement only in 1 quarter. So what about the next the remaining 4 quarters?
Yeah, sir, got it.
Yeah. Did you got this, Akhil, or do you want me to clarify more on this?
Yes, sir, I've got an idea about it.
Okay. The next variable is the component inventories, because the components were zero, so that's why it's a zero for them. The third is the materials inventory, which we worked upon yesterday, which we, if you'll see your income statement, we did this, we understood how this list closing inventory value is coming, which is basically the value of your leftover inventory, the closing stock, which is of 3664 goods. So that is how you're getting this as the next value in your materials inventory. Now see this, guys, trade receivables. Again, this is something I showed you in this trade receivables, so the remaining of this is the money from which is left to be collected from the customers from this sales revenue. So this is something we also discussed this in just priorly as well. Okay. Now this is important, guys, and this is, this cash and cash equivalents, and this is primarily why I didn't discuss this information in the last session, because we'll be spending some time on the cash and cash equivalents. We'll be spending some time on the overdraft facility. We'll be spending some time on the interest. So I would now like to ask a question that, I have taken this extract from the financial statements. The cash balance is 961,267. Then why in the balance sheet I am having a cash and cash equivalent of 105,000 and another zero? So why am I
The
having
rest
this?
is overdraft. The difference of 10,500 and the cash balance is taken as overdraft, which is 88,733.
Correct, which is correct, overdraft. So, but why still not am I having 961,267? I understand you are getting how we are getting this overdraft limit, how we are getting this, and we'll discuss this for all the participants.
So because we haven't broke our term deposit, we haven't entered a negative amount which can suffice that
Okay.
remaining cash.
Okay, Akhil, I think you have the idea about it, but is there any other participant that can explain me? Akhil definitely knows why we are having 105 over here. But I want to know it from the other participants as well, because understanding this is very important for, for your overall knowledge. All right. Let me try and explain this, I want to, guys, when you see this cash balance, it is mentioned that it is including a term deposit of 105,000. So ideally you are having zero money, because if I subtract this term deposit from it, you're getting a negative value, which is not possible. So that means your cash balance is zero. That's why only this 105,000 figure is mentioned over here, because the difference of this amount is what you have acquired from the overdraft facility. Now let's consider this example and let's see how this overdraft facility works. So this is the extract of the year 17 quarter 1 of what was the status of the cash balance at the end of the quarter 1. So at the day 0 of the quarter 2, my receipts are 0, my payments are 0. So my total receipts and my total payments are 0. So receipts minus payment is again 0. So what is my cash balance is? It is 1,490,807, which is the figure that is mentioned in the financial statement of the quarter 1. So I have this as my cash balance. So this is including a term deposit of 105,000. So if I subtract this from the cash balance, I get my net cash balance as 440807. So at this point of time, because my net cash balance is positive, I have not used the overdraft facility. Now let's see the day one, guys. Let's see the day one of the quarter two. Let's say the money starts to come in, and let's say at the end of the day one, you have received 5,000 euros. And also because you will be starting to make some payments, and let's say the expense for the day one is 100,000 euros now. So what is my total receipts? It is 5,000 plus euro, which is still 5,000 euros. Total payment is 100,000 euros. So what is my net receipts minus payment? It is minus 95,000 euros. So this amount will now get deducted from my cash balance. So my net cash balance, because this I cannot use the term deposit now because I have not withdrawn it from the bank. So my net cash balance comes as 345,807, which is still positive, and hence my overdraft account is still stays at 0. Now let's see at the day two now. You again get a receipt of 6,000 euros, and this is, I'm just taking an example, guys. You know, and your payments are now 500,000 euros. You have to pay more now in this quarter. So accordingly, you get your total receipts, you get your total payments, you get R minus P, you get your cash balance as this. Now when I deduct this cash balance from the deposit, you know, because deposit is with the bank, my net cash balance is coming negative. So ideally, to overcome this payments or to overcome this difference in R minus P, I need additional 148,193 of euros. How do I get this? I get this from my overdraft facility, guys. How is this possible from the overdraft facility? Because my overdraft limit for next quarter was 381,000, which is less than what I require. So I get this as my overdraft facility. Now let's jump to day 10 now. Let's say on the day 10, I get more revenue. I get 500,000 euros. My net expense was 400,000 euros. So I do this calculation. The net cash balance has now reduced from minus 148 to minus 48, guys. Now, guys, this is important. My overdraft account balance will now not be, you know, the additional of it. It will now only remain. So I now need only 481,933. So, you know, in hindsight, I have actually paid back my 10,000 euros or the 100,000 euros to the overdraft account. And now I am only using 481,933 from the overdraft account. So, guys, is this part clear? Is this part clear on how?
Yes, this overdraft will be automatically paid depending upon the income that we have and the amount that is left, right? We need
Correct. It is not getting repaid. Actually, this is how it works in the real life as well. When we have taken on overdraft facility, or when we are using money from the overdraft facility, and in the next quarter the money starts to come in, or in the next few days money starts to come in. Firstly, that money will be deposited in the overdraft account to avoid the interest. So are you able to follow this, how this variable is coming?
Yeah.
This is very important, you know, not only for GMC, guys. I made up this table to understand how the cash flow statement works, so that you guys can figure, you know, understand how we use the overdraft account and how do we use our cash balance. So now let's jump to day 60 now. More revenue comes in, the payments start to decrease. You get your net cash balance now, which becomes positive. So then now, because it has become positive, my overdraft account is 0. I have whatever this money that I used is from the overdraft account, I have made it to 0 with the bank now. And similarly on day 90, you know, we had this much of receipts, we had this much of payments finally on day 90. Also, we have to include for this, if you see your financial statements, you received an interest of 2625. We'll come to this calculation as well. And also you paid an interest of 10,567, so which I have taken into account for the day 90 as well. So you finally get a minus 88,733 as the cash balance, which becomes your overdraft account. And this is, if you'll see your overdraft, bank overdraft, this is how this value is coming, 88,733. So guys, is this particular table clear? Any participant that has this doubt on this particular table? Also, just to, yes, please go ahead.
Is it that taking the overdraft have a negative impact on our investment performance? Like if we use overdraft, does it show that we are not capable or anything?
No. Overdraft is something, okay. Overdraft is something that is provided to you to meet out your cash balance differences. Overdraft has no direct impact. Ideally speaking, if your overdraft limit is increasing, if your borrowing power is increasing, it will have a positive impact on your share price, because the bank is, confident, is more confident in providing you a higher limit compared to the other competitors. That means the bank values your company to be more stronger company, to be a more, it's like your company is having a better rating compared to the others. So the only downside of the overdraft is that you have to pay an interest rate for the overdraft that you are using, which is hardly any expense. And I'll show this calculation on how we calculate the interest for the overdraft. But before that, it is important to understand how this cash balance is working, how this overdraft money is being used by your company. And this is how it works in the real life as well, guys. There is no difference to it. So is this table clear, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. This is something not related to GMC, but I can still, specify this to you guys, so that, for your overall learning, if you'll see this, and this is how it works in the real life. Let's say the overdraft limit is 381,000, guys. Now I mentioned in my previous, and this is something outside GMC, guys. This is for your learning of the financial statements, because you will not study this in your education program. This is something that is not taught, at least it was not taught to us, but we were able to, or I was able to learn this from my experience of working. So I think this is a very good knowledge that you can learn from it, and this is something new that you will probably see. That 381,000 is the maximum overdraft limit that I can avail in the next quarter. And I mentioned to you in the last session, in the session that we did before the round 2, that a bank will create a separate account for the overdraft facility, right? The balance at the start of the overdraft account is always 0, guys. Okay. The balance of an overdraft account is always at the start is 0. Now let's say I use 1,000 euros from this overdraft account. Let's say, so my balance will become minus 1,000, guys. Overdraft account always goes in negative. This is very important to understand, guys. If you'll see, I'm not sure if you have seen any overdraft statements. If you have seen the bank statement of an overdraft facility, why negative 1,000? Because this is the money that you have taken from the bank, or this is the money of, this much money you have used from the bank, from the overdraft account, which belongs to the bank. Now let's say I get 200 as my revenue now in the next few days, which I deposited in the overdraft account. So now my overdraft account balance will become minus 800. And again, let's say I have another 1,200 expense. So my overdraft balance now becomes minus 2,000. The maximum negative it can go is till minus 381,000. Okay, now you can ask me this doubt. If let's say I am making a revenue of 400,000, so will my overdraft account will have a positive balance of 19,000? Guys, overdraft account will never go positive. So if you have made a revenue of 400,000, your overdraft account balance will be 0, but in your other current account that your company is owning, you will put that money in that particular account, guys. So is this working of the overdraft statement clear, guys?
Yes.
So overdraft account will never go beyond 0. If you have made more money, you'll ensure that your overdraft limit is, your balance in overdraft is 0, and the rest of the money you have deposited in your current account. So this is how accounts work. So this is something, primarily not related to GMC, but just for your understanding of the overdraft, I tried to give this example to you guys. Okay. So we discussed how the cash balance and we discussed how the overdraft account is getting calculated. So accordingly, therefore, you have your 88733 as your bank overdraft. We also understood how you're getting this trade payables, because that is basically the so this is something again we discussed, that you'll be not paying entirely, you'll be paying this amount. So this trade payables is the amount that will be paid in the next quarter. So this amount will automatically form a part of your trading payments in the next quarter. So like this, you get your total liabilities. So this company has also taken a loan of 400,000 euros, which is again added in their liability. So this is how you get your liabilities in the balance sheet. Now let's see this. If I go back to the cash flow statements, now let's see this investing activities, and let's see how this 2625 interest received is getting calculated, and how this interest paid of 10567 is getting calculated. All right. So my deposit with the bank is 1050000. Interest rate for this is 1%. So I get my interest rate as, I do the simple interest calculation with the linear calculation. This, because this is per annum, so it will be divided by 4 for one particular quarter, and I get this as a 2625, which is what the interest you have received from the bank for a deposit of 1050000. Now let's calculate our interest paid expense. So your interest paid will have two parts: term loan interest and the overdraft interest, correct? So the interest on term loan, it will be 10%, which is mentioned in the manual. But the interest on the overdraft, it is mentioned as the base rate plus 4%. So my base rate is 1%. So my interest on the overdraft is 5%. Now I have this doubt to the participants. Why not only in GMC, but even in the real life, the rate of interest for the overdraft is always lower than the term loan? If any participant can tell me, and this is again not related to GMC, but just understanding the finance, why even in the real life, the rate of interest for overdraft facilities are lower than compared to the term loan? If any participant would like to answer this, if you can give it a try, maybe you guess it wrong, but if you could just give it a try. Why?
So
Yes.
term loans are usually taken for a long-term period, so the risk is more, so the banks will charge more interest, whereas overdraft, you usually require it for day-to-day activities or working capital needs and so on. So the risk is quite less because it will be repaid over a shorter duration.
Okay. The answer is actually opposite to what you are saying, and Abhishek, I'll clarify this, but it's a good try. You are nearby to the, it is of course related to the payment period, but any other participant would like to give it a try on why the interest rate for overdraft is lower compared to the term loans? All right. Let me explain this to you guys now. So if you remember in my discussion, when I discussed the difference between the term loan and the overdraft facility, I discussed that this amount is repaid and this is never repaid. So if the bank has given you this overdraft limit of 381,000, the bank is not asking you to repay it. Of course, what we do by this cash flow is that if we have already used an overdraft account and we have a positive cash balance, so instead of depositing it with the current in a separate current account, we deposit it in a overdraft account to avoid the interest. But this facility is never repaid, but this is repaid. Let's say you have a term loan of 7 years, and this is, it is, so there is no time period for the overdraft because the facility will be there till the time your company is performing its business. On a term loan facility, the bank will receive an interest rate only for 7 years, guys. Whereas on an overdraft, the bank will continue to receive an interest till the till the end of the time, till the company is operational. So that is one reason, guys, why the overdraft interest rates are lower than the term loan, because on the overdraft, the bank continues to get interest each year with, even after 7 years when this loan is repaid, the overdraft facility is still there. So bank is still, bank will earn interest till the period the company is operational. That is one reason why this overdraft has lower interest rate compared to the term loan. And the second reason is what Abhishek currently mentioned, that the risk in term loan is higher because it is generally used, term loans, companies acquire term loans to invest in new assets, to invest in new facilities. So the risk in term loan is higher compared to the ones in the overdraft, because the overdraft account is something that is changing regularly on day-to-day basis. Companies are managing their overdraft account to minimize their interest expense, if they have a positive cash balance. So the risk in his term loan is higher compared to overdraft. So that is the other reason why the interest rate for overdraft is always lower compared to that of the term loan. So similarly in GMC, you have 10% as the interest rate for term loan and 5% as the interest rate for the overdraft. So guys, were you able to follow that why the interest rate for overdraft is lower compared to the term loan?
Yes.
Okay. So now let's calculate the interest for the term loan at 10%. You simply, again, like we did for the deposit, we multiply this amount by the 10% and divide this by 4. We get this interest as 10,000 euros. Now the overdraft that we use was 88733. So again, we do the same calculation. We multiply it by 5% and divide it by 4. We get this interest as 1109. And if I sum them up, I'm getting 11109. But the interest that is charged to me is 10567. So why is there is a difference of 542 now? If any participant can, and this is guys very important, not only for GMC, but when you are understanding finance and when you will be working for a company, or when you will be going out there in the market, this is how interest calculations happen. So you should be able to figure out these things when somebody asks you these questions in future now, and when you have taken this experience of participating in GMC, you should be able to assess these differences in the accounting calculations. So now, I've already given an answer to this, but I still would like to know why is there still a difference in the interest amount, from our calculation. Why is it not 11109, and why are we getting a difference of 542 euros now? Okay. Now, when I did this calculation, guys, is this clear that this is the interest rate that I have calculated for the overdraft facility for entire 3 months? Correct. So this is an interest rate that I have calculated for 90 days. But if I see my cash flow, as if I see this example, I have not used any overdraft for day 1. So why will I pay an interest to the bank on day 1? I will pay 0 interest to the bank on day 1. So that goes minus. Even on the day 2, I have used 148,193, but my net overdraft was 8873. So my interest rate from day 2 to day 10. So I'll be paying an interest of 9 days on this amount for 184,193. And now at the day 10, my overdraft account is now 48193, and it remains so till day 60. So on this amount only, I will be paying an interest of 5% for 51 days. So when we calculate the interest for an overdraft, guys, it is calculated on a daily basis on what is the amount of overdraft that you have used on each particular day. So accordingly, guys, you in this competition, you will not be able to calculate this exact value. But yes, your interest will not be more than 11109. So are you able to figure out now why there is a difference between your interest calculation and the actual interest that you have paid to the bank?
Yes, sir.
And this is very important to understand, guys. If you have any doubt, please ask me now, because this is something not only in GMC, guys, this is, trust me when I say this is very important for your learning in your overall understanding of the financial statement. So if there is any doubt, please feel free to ask me. This is something that, that is why I didn't discuss this in the last session. This is why I kept it for this session. Any doubt, guys, on understanding why there's a difference between this, between our calculation and the actual interest paid? Any doubt with regard to why an interest on rupees 148,193 will be paid for 9 days, and why and why not for 3 months, or why not for the entire quarter? Any doubt with regard to this?
No, sir.
Okay. So this is how we get our net cash flow from financing. So now I'll again go to the financial statement. So we have discussed the liabilities. We have discussed this finance activities. So this net assets is your net worth now, which is simply the total assets minus total liabilities. You get your net worth or the net assets for the company. This is the share capital, or this is the money that you have earned by issuing shares in the market. So this much is the share capital that you owe. Now if you add or subtract, if you add the retained earnings into it, this becomes the total equity, which matches your net worth, which is very simple calculation, which is easily which is a very simple concept, which I believe everybody knows by now. And similarly in the cash flow statement, so you do the sum of all these operating activities, you get your net cash flow. You deduct this, or you add this amount to your previous cash balance, you get your current cash balance. So guys, any doubt with regard to these 4 financial statements now? I have tried to cover all these 4 statements in detail. Any
One
doubt?
thing
Yes,
I wanted to understand is again the term, if we take term loans for particular quarters, like let's say quarter 4 and quarter 5, does it also have any negative impact on the investor performance, showing that, whether the activities are being sustained or not, or in that manner?
Okay, let
Does
me
it
ask
have
you
any
this
effect?
question now. Let me ask you this question. Let's say you want to create a portfolio, and you want to invest, you want to buy some shares from the market for a particular company. And now let's consider this example. There is company 1, and then there is company 2. Now both the companies in the last quarter, let's take this example, have taken a loan of 1,000 rupees from the bank. Whereas company 1 has invested this 1,000 rupees to start a new business line. So they have taken this to start a new business line, and this company has taken this loan to meet out its day-to-day expenses. Basically, they have just taken up a loan and they have not started a new business. So which company would you like to invest now? Which company share would you like to buy now?
The first one,
Why first one?
because it is venturing into new businesses. That means it is able to sustain its organic growth. I mean, day-to-day expenses are at least covered, whereas in company 2 it is not the case.
Exactly. And this is what I highlighted in my previous session before the round 2 is, when you're taking a facility like term loan, guys, ideally, if you're not able to meet out your day-to-day expenses from your net cash flow, that means that your business is making losses. So if your business is making losses, of course, that will have a negative impact on your share price. If you're taking a term loan facility to develop your assets, so if let's say I add this term loan, let's say I take a term loan of 300,000 euros. So this becomes 700,000. So this becomes 700,000 euros now. And I take this 300,000 euros and I buy a machine now. So this machinery value will become 420. So that has no effect on your balance sheet. Did you follow this, Shekhar?
Yes, I was able to get it. So if you are investing in, let's say, new machineries or new land expansion or something like that, then if we take the loan, it is a good sign.
It is not a good sign, but the effect of it is zero.
Yes. Net effect is zero. I mean that.
Net effect is zero. But if you're taking a term loan for your day-to-day expenses, so you are only increasing your liabilities, which will decrease your net assets.
Got it.
Yeah. And this is how you read financial statement. This is how you assess financial statements. This is how you plan for you. And this is something I specified in the last quarter as well. And see, again, I would like to highlight for this particular company, they have taken a term loan of 400,000 euros when they had a term deposit of 105,000.
And additional thing, how do we repay this? Like, do we, let's say we invested in machinery and after a couple of quarters, we got the money. So we repay the term loan as soon as possible, or is it okay to keep it for interest?
So what is mentioned in the manual is, so because you are only playing for 5 quarters, so you don't there is no facility to repay the loan. Ideally as well, when you acquire a loan, there is always a grace period, or there is a, let's say, the repayment starts in a particular time, right? So there is no provision to repay. So that will form a part of your balance sheet till the, till the end of the cycle. But what you have to see is, let's say you have taken up this loan, and now, so let's say you've taken a 300,000 euros loan. So this becomes 700,000, and this you have used to increase your machinery. So this becomes 1,500,000. Now, when you have taken up a new machinery, even though the net effect of taking this loan and adding an asset as having a zero, you need to increase your business now. So when you have taken up this machinery, at the same time your cash and cash equivalent should increase, or your trade receivables should increase, because that new machine should now bring in more money to you, or should bring more revenue to your company, so that this loan effect, because in the next quarter the machine will get depreciated by 2.5%. So at least you should make more than 2.5% in the next quarter. Otherwise, this loan that you have taken will now start to have a negative effect on your company. So did you follow this, Shekhar?
Yeah, totally understood.
Any other doubt, guys, with regard to this financial
Also, sir, regarding machinery, will selling the machinery have a negative impact on investment performance? Suppose we are already having stocks, product stocks a lot, and now in the next quarters we don't feel like producing that much. So instead of producing unnecessarily, is it good idea to sell the machine?
Okay. So let's analyze this mathematically now. Let's say you purchase a machine in Q1 for 300,000 euros. So in Q2, the value of the machine becomes this into 97.5%. And now let's see Q3, Q4, the Q1 of the next year, or the Q5. And let's see now. So for a machine that you purchase for 300,000 euros, let's say you decide to sell it in the last quarter. So you will be only selling it for 271106. So basically you will be making a loss of 30,000 euros straight away in the 5 quarters. So that is one drawback. So which will reduce, so one is that when you sell a machine, you will automatically reduce your net worth. You will automatically reduce your net assets by doing that. Also, you will be losing this money difference, from, you bought something expensive and now you will be selling it cheaper. I understand this could be a case, when the finances are completely bad and you have no other option. Probably in the last round you could have done this, but yeah, that will completely, decrease your machinery. But what I would like to give a suggestion here is, why do you want to sell machinery? You could always work on, reduce your shift. Try and work it out, maybe if that is the case, if you're already having huge warehouse stock, you could probably reduce your shift, so that, with those number of machinery, you are still able to meet out the basic cost of production. So that is something that you can take up a decision. If you only sell a machinery when the case is, when even in the real life, when do bankers come to, sell off your mortgages? When your finances are completely gone down. So that is the case when you will be selling your machine. And also, if you sell your machine, that will decrease your resources, which will have a negative impact on your share price at the end of the day. So is your doubt clear in this regard?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Now let's go to this group information part, and let's discuss how this economic factors is influence your demand or influence your business. So this is your GDP for Europe, for NAFTA, and for the rest of the world. This is something, I hope you all understand what we mean by GDP. So you have to see, is the GDP increasing or a GDP decreasing? If the GDP is increasing, guys, that means, it's an indicator that the demand can increase in the next quarter. Because the GDP increasing means that the buying power of each customer is increasing. So that is how you read these economic factors. If the unemployment rate is decreasing, the next variable is the unemployment rate. So guys, let's say the unemployment rate from 9.2 now goes to, let's say, 9. So that means when in your decision sheet, when you are taking a decision, assembly workers to recruit, if the unemployment rate has gone down, you will find it more difficult to recruit the assembly workers. And this was applicable in the previous round as well. You figured it out that some companies, they try to recruit 5 workers, 4 workers, but they ended up recruiting only 1 or 2 workers. So that is why this factor is being given. So you have to analyze how the unemployment rate has behaved from the previous quarters. Balance of external trade, you again know, which is the exports minus the imports for a particular region. So a higher balance of external trade is always good for that particular economy. The interest rate, the next is the interest rate. This is something that we generally it keeps constant, but you still have to watch out for this interest rate as well. Exchange rate is something that we have discussed the importance of the exchange rate in the previous discussions as well. So we'll not try and take this discussion more forward. You already know what is the importance of this building cost. So when you are trying to develop your factory, this is the cost you have to pay per square meter for developing the factory. We have also analyzed the component cost as well. What we mean by this figures. So this is for the subcontracting. This is the cost of subcontracting your product. But this is what I want to highlight now. Now let's say I am selling. So let's say, what is the difference between the 100% premium cost and the 123, and the no premium cost, which is 32. So the third party is charging, let's say I am ordering my product 1 at 100% inventory. So the additional cost that the third party will now charge me is only 32 rupees for this 100% premium material. Now let's say I manufacture this 100% premium material now. Let's say I do it myself now. So what is my basic cost? It is this divided by 1000 into the exchange rate, guys. So that comes at 64, guys. Now if even I am going for 100% cost, so this, if I divide this by 2, so I get the same figure as 32. So probably what I'm trying to show here is that for the last particular round, if you would have done the cost analysis, the cost of getting your products machined from the outside, from the components, was cheaper. If you'll see the vendor, there is a cost of procuring the premium material as well. Also, they depend on the material. So the prices have continuously changed in each quarter, but the component cost have more or less remained constant in all the quarters. In this particular quarter, even though it is coming same, but there are quarters wherein the cost that you would have incurred for premium material was 34, and the vendor was doing it for 32 rupees. So you can clearly see that if you would have outsourced your production, or you could have if you could have saved if you have used the subcontracting option in the last round, you could have saved few money. So when you are taking your decision, you have to see whether my cost of production, is it higher than what the third party is offering me. If it is offering me if it is offering me 123 euros for product 1 as my cost of production for machining till machining, you assess that with your machining cost and then see the difference. If it is lower, then probably you should not produce yourself. You only produce the minimum quantities required for, to manage your machines, and the remaining you could outsource to the third party to save your cost. And that is the importance of financial statement, guys. And that is the importance of this variable. So are you able to follow this component cost, guys?
Yes, sir.
But the subcontracting that we'll do in this quarter, we'll get those products in next quarter, and then they will be assembled, so we can sell them in the quarter next to that. So basically there is a 2-quarter lag, right?
No,
We'll have to do.
You order subcontracting for quarter 1. Let's say you order in support subcontracting in quarter 1. So this 100 will be available in quarter 2. So you will be selling this 100 in quarter 2 now.
Okay. Yeah.
So guys, what I try to highlight is, and I am pretty sure that not many teams have compared their cost of production till the machining part with the component cost. I have done this analysis myself that the machining, the component cost that the third party is charging me is less than what our cost of machining is coming. And you know, we can do a little analysis in this over here as well. Let's see the machinist wages now. It is let's see this. It is 3,393,000, and now let's see the how many machinist workers that we are having. So we are having a total of 60 machinist workers. Okay. So I divide this by 60 now. So it comes at 5655. And now let's see the total products that you know they are manufacturing or they are producing. Okay. So if I sum them, of course this is not a right calculation, but just to show you the highlight, it is coming as 3969. You know, just to give you an idea. So now if I divide this by 3969. Okay, because because it is working on triple shift. So you know, probably if you'll do this assessment, if you'll calculate your cost of production for, you know, I have to do a lot of calculations to show this to you. I think it will not be possible this way. But what I mean to say is, if you can calculate your machining cost, which you can calculate, which is very easy, you have to see whether the third party is offering it me at a higher price. If it is offering at a higher price, of course you will not go to the third party. But if it is offering at a lower price, then you have an option to, you know, restrict, you know, focus on assembly as a company yourself, and, you know, outsource the machining part of your company to the third party. So is this part clear, guys?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So again, you know, coming to the inventory prices, and now why, you know, how you could have predicted for an economic crisis in the Q3. So if you saw the report in 16 Q1, the inventory price was somewhere around 71,000 euros, and straight away in 16 Q2 it jumped from 71,000 euros to 84,000 euros, and this is something I explained in the last session as well, that the pricing of the basic raw material has gone high. So when this happens, the cost of goods becomes expensive for all the products, not only the products that you are selling, but, you know, the effect of this will be felt in the entire industry, in all the industries. So this will reduce the demand, and this is one variable. If you would have noticed this change. So I had Adil, you know, asking a doubt with regard to economics. So this is something, you know, you could have predicted, or this is something you could have noticed, and you could have cut down your production, because everybody went heavy in the Q3, assuming that the sales are increasing in each quarter. And this is how everybody defaulted in Q3, and everybody ended up having huge warehouse stocks at the end of the Q3 of the last round. So Adil, are you able to follow this, how this economics, you know, so you have to assess, you know, whether there is a change in any economic factor. You have to observe the change in the economic factor, and only then you will be able to, you know, feel the effect of it. So Adil, am I able to answer your query?
Yes.
So can you repeat this point again?
Which point here?
So this economics, how the demand fell in the third quarter.
Okay, so this is something we discussed in the last session as well. So if you have your reports, you should analyze this, that in my Q1, 16 Q1, my inventory prices were somewhere around, material prices were somewhere around $71,000. Whereas in Q2, they straight away jumped from $71,000 to the $84,000. Ideally, they should change only in the proportion of the exchange rate. But here, there was a huge jump. So why has that happened? So Dhananjay, did you notice this spike in the inventory in the last round?
No, sir. Actually, I did not notice that. So
Again, so that is why this is the importance of the economic intelligence. So now let's say why has your inventory gone expensive? Because the basic utilities, like, you know, okay, the other parameters that determine the cost of inventory or the production of inventory, like the power, like the, you know, the government taxation, or like the other expenses, or like the oil, for example, If they have become expensive, the inventory has become expensive, and this effect will be felt in all the industries, in the entire market. So when such an increase in the inventory has happened, so you clearly get an indication that the market is behaving. Of course, you could not have predicted the economic crisis. That is something you could not predict. But what you could have predicted was that there is certain anomaly in the next quarter. The prices of inventory have suddenly jumped, and there is no basis for this. And then, sticking to the common sense, when the inventory cost goes higher, the cost of production gets higher. And now when the cost of production gets higher, the selling price increases, which will reduce the demand. Now neutralizing this. So if you didn't notice this increase in the inventory cost, you probably didn't change your pricing accordingly. And when you didn't change your pricing accordingly, you would have ended up making losses because the
Correct.
cost of materials have increased now.
Yes, I got it.
Any doubt, guys, with regard to this particular economic section?
Showing it is for the next quarter, right? Not for the current quarter, what the prices were.
Correct. So in 16 quarter 2, if this was so, for 16 quarter 2, the price was $71,000. And this is mentioned for the quarter 3. So clearly in quarter 3, the inventory has gone expensive. So that's why there was a crisis in the quarter 3.
Got it.
All right. So this is why I wanted to discuss these financial statement, guys. I hope you were able to follow what we discussed in this session. Very important for your overall learning, very important for your understanding these financial statements. And again, guys, finance is the key to your decision making. If you as a senior management are not able to figure out actual finance, if you're not able to figure out the financial strength of your company, if you're not able to figure out the financial position of your company, you will end up taking wrong decisions for your company, and which I showed so many wrong decisions for this particular company that could have been avoided, and they could have qualified for the national finals. So this is pretty much it from my side. If any participant has any doubt, I'll be happy to clarify it for them. So if any participant has any doubt. Okay. So this is probably the last session that we'll have now, because now it is now it is rest. Now it's up to you teams. Now it's up to you guys how you figure out all these details. You have to develop a very strong model on the Excel. The national final will be tough. The history is very tough. Yes, Ragul, I have your hand, please. Yeah.
Yeah, sir, I lost a connection in between. So I have a doubt. I have doubt regarding dividend and buyback of share. When to give dividend and when to give buyback. We tried different, proportions, but is there any clear understanding about this?
Okay.
Can you give insights?
Okay. Yeah. Did you notice this variable?
Yeah, earnings per share. Earnings per share. We also considered that. For example, share capital and profit and loss, we will get the earnings per share. If it is positive, we will give dividend.
Correct. So you understand now. So yeah. You cannot pay dividend higher than your EPS.
Yes, that is understandable. But yeah, regarding the buyback,
yes, sir. Yeah, because if you're paying dividends higher than your EPS, that means you're paying it from your own company's pot.
Yes, exactly. Unless until it is positive, we won't give dividends. If the EPS is increasing over a period, we need to give dividend to increase the market sentiment.
So that is the importance of bringing your okay. So I had to discuss this one more thing, guys, and this is where I'll cover Ragul's doubt as well. These are the factors that your share price depends upon. So we discussed on the company's net worth, we discussed on the profitability, and now let's see how the profitability is related to the dividend, guys. If your profit is increasing, your EPS will increase. If your EPS will increase, only then you will be able to increase your dividends to your shareholders. And it is mentioned in the manual that erratic or low dividends have a negative effect. So that means if you're having let's say if the EPS was, now let's see the other way around. Let's say if the EPS, let's forget the minus figure now. Let's say the EPS was positive 18.87 and you're paying only 1 cent as the dividend. you know, the shareholder will not accept this, or the shareholder, this will, you know, you are paying a low dividend or you are paying an erratic dividend at this, in this particular scenario. So that will have a negative effect on your share price, because, you know, paying a good dividend to your shareholders will have a positive effect on your, you know, not probably not necessarily in the real world, but it does have a positive effect on your share price in GMC. So that's how you get the dividends. Now coming to a query on how to calculate, you know, or how to assess when do we repurchase shares. Okay. So ideally, the variable that you have to consider for repurchase is your retained earnings. All right.
Okay.
So one of the factors is the retained earnings, or maybe not even the retained earnings. Probably one of the, you know, you have to consider one of the variables is the net cash flow. You know, so you have to see whether, if you are having positive cash flow or if you are having positive money, of course that will implicate your retained earnings as well. But if you are having a positive cash flow, if you use that cash flow now to buy back some shares now, so that will increase your share price, that will increase your investment performance, but that will also have a negative impact. If you use your cash flow to buy back shares, your cash and cash equivalents will reduce over from here. And also your share capital will reduce now, because you have buy back the shares from the market. So so I am trying to discuss an anomaly here right now. I'm trying to discuss a mistake that the participants are doing. You are you consider your cash flow, you have this positive cash flow, and now you use that cash flow to buy back the shares. So automatically your cash flow decreases, your share capital will decrease because you have buy back the shares. So accordingly your net assets are decreasing. So how do you decide to buy back shares? So basically, let's say my net cash flow was, let's say, 1000 in the quarter one, and now it is 1200 in the quarter two. So you cannot consider 1200, but what you have to consider is the difference in the increase in the cash flow. Are you able to follow this, Ragul? What I tried?
Yeah. Okay.
You understood why I considered the difference?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Because at the end, because then at least that 1000 is getting calculated in your net assets. Is this any participant that would like, you know, more clarification on this? This is very important to understand. How do we decide? You know, if you are buying back shares, you know, this will have a positive impact on your investment performance, but it will also have a negative impact on your net worth or your net, you know, net assets. So then how do you balance it out? You have to consider the difference in your increase in the cash flow. Any other doubt, guys?
I have a question.
Yes, Gagan.
So this is related to the product inventories under the current assets. So
Okay.
I understood the component inventories and material inventory. So product inventory, is it like the work in progress, or do we have some finished products?
It is the value of the warehouse stock.
Okay, but wouldn't that once we have actually sold it, wouldn't that be transferred to the other dealers and distributors from our balance sheet? Wouldn't it go off?
Okay. So, okay, and this is a very good doubt, Gaganpreet. Let's say, you know, you have your agents and distributors. I don't know how, if you have, you know, one of the industry that is comes very close to my mind is the cement industry. And I don't know if you have an experience of seeing the balance sheets of the cement industry. Or so cement industry also works in the same pattern, wherein they have the agents and distributors in the market, and they give them so the agent or the local distributor will provide a warehouse facility wherein they will stock the company's product in their own warehouses, If you remember, when I discussed the costing of the warehousing, you are paying the rent for the warehouse firstly. So agents and distributors, so you have sent your products to the agents and distributors. They then will sold it in the market. But until it is sold to the customer, that product still belongs to the company. Your
Okay,
agent, your
understood.
agents is not paying you the money. The money is paid by the, had the age, let's talk about something like the franchisee system. Now let's say I have taken a franchisee for, let's say, Tanishq, let's say for the Tanishq watch. So I buy the inventory from the Tanishq watches manufacturing. So I have paid them the money for that watch. But in this case, the agents has not paid me the money. He has taken that much of quantity, he has stored it in his warehouse, and now he's selling it in the market.
Okay, understood. And one more question, follow-up question, from the inventory part itself. How do we do we really need to calculate the work in progress? Because I was trying to calculate the amount of material that we have used. So, for example, let's say I'm carrying forward some material from the last quarter, which will be priced at whatever I had bought it at. So basically at the historical cost. And now, if I buy a material in the current quarter at some other price, so I was actually trying to calculate what would be my actual cost that was actually used to come to the cost of sales. So is there any shorter way to do it, or we'll have to go through the whole bunch of
So,
calculations?
so ideally, ideally what you can do is, okay, I pretty much get your doubt. Let's say your closing stock in a quarter one is in the, okay, let's say your opening stock in quarter one is 1,000 euros. So please correct me if this is not your doubt. And let's say you use 800 inventories from this and you left with a 200 closing stock. So in quarter two, this becomes your opening stock. And again, let's say you have used 800, probably because you have purchased some more inventory, so your doubt is that this was at a different price, and now what you purchase in quarter two is at a different price. So how do I get my cost of production? Is that what your doubt is?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Ideally, how it works is, firstly, the previous stock will be used in the production in the next quarter. Because let's say, and again, this is very important to understand, your production will start on day one, and it will again start on day two and day three, and let's say your inventory comes on day 10. If you have a zero closing stock, you will have zero production for these days.
Yes.
So initially the closing stock will be used first, and that is again the importance of having a closing stock, guys. If you are having a zero closing stock or have a minimum closing stock, till the time your inventory comes in, you will be making because the production will start first day, first hour itself. And it will not happen that there is a buffer time wherein all the goods will come in straight away. It will take time, like in the real world. So does this answer your question, Gaganpreet?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay. So guys, any other doubt? Maybe not related to the financial statements, related to other, because now because the national finals will be starting probably by tomorrow or day after tomorrow. So we are still yet to receive the login credentials. So, but still, if you have any doubt, you want me to cover any particular variable,
Just one thing.
Yes, Shekhar, please.
The warehouse stocks that we mentioned in the inventory, what is the price at which it is valued, like the current market price?
So it is mentioned in the it is mentioned in the tables. One of the table is there in which specifies the values, how you calculate the product inventories, the component inventories, and the materials inventory. So which is very easy. If you'll see the table, you will be able to figure it out.
Thank you.
Akhil, did you have a doubt?
It was the same question.
Okay. So this is from my side, guys. I wish you all the best for the next round. It's enjoy it. It's gonna be tough. You're gonna it is a new company now. It is a company that is well established now. So just to give you an idea, and I told this yesterday as well, you'll be working. So just to give you an idea, that there'll be 10 machines now for this particular company. The financial statements will be tough now. So you know, you again, this what all we discuss in this session will be very helpful for your analysis in the next round. So all the best. I wish you all, your teammates, your family members, a very happy Diwali. And in the middle of the round, if you have any doubt, you can always write it to me or email to me at our email address. So I'll try and answer them as quickly as possible from my side. So I wish you guys all the best, and you know, thank you for attending these two sessions, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.